Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving deep into a really provocative book called Web of Debt. It's written by author and attorney Ellen Hodgson Brown, and believe me, it challenges pretty much everything we've been taught about money. She uses some incredible historical research to argue that there's a fundamental fraud right at the very heart of our banking system. So let's kick things off with a pretty mind-blowing quote that the book opens with. This comes from a former governor of the Bank of England, and he said the modern banking system manufactures money out of nothing. Just think about that. He warned that this power was so huge that bankers could, just with the flick of a pen, create enough money to literally buy everything else. And that quote leads us to this massive question, doesn't it? If the money is just created out of thin air, who exactly are we all in debt to? This question, right here, is the central mystery that Ellen Brown tries to solve, and it's what we're going to be unraveling today. It really gets you thinking about the very nature of debt itself. Okay, so to answer that question, we first have to understand this sleight of hand she's talking about. How money is actually literally created from nothing. The research in the book uncovers a pretty shocking truth about what our money supply is really made of. Okay, get this. The book points to data from 2005 showing that less than 3%, let that sink in, less than 3% of the money supply in the U.S. is actual physical cash, the coins and bills we carry around. A staggering 97.6% of it is just credit, created digitally by private banks every single time they make a loan. And the name for this whole process? It's called fractional reserve banking. This is the engine that drives the whole system described in the book. It's the mechanism that lets banks create that massive sea of digital debt from just a tiny little bit of physical cash. The book uses this amazing analogy. It compares the whole system to the Wizard of Oz. We're all told to follow the yellow brick road. That's kind of like the gold standard we were supposed to trust. But the real power, that's the man behind the curtain. And in this story, that's the private banking system, including the Federal Reserve, pulling the levers and creating this grand illusion that shapes our entire economy. So you might be wondering, how in the world did we get here? Well, according to the book, this system didn't just pop up overnight. Oh no. It was the result of a long and often hidden war over one simple thing: who gets to control the nation's money? And you can see this battle play out right through American history. On one side, you had leaders like Benjamin Franklin, Jefferson, Andrew Jackson, even Abraham Lincoln. They all believed the government should be the one to create money for the good of the public. But on the other side, you had powerful private financial interests who wanted that power for themselves. And that fight really culminated in 1913 with the Federal Reserve Act, which the book says handed control over to a private banking group. And just to show you how intense this fight was, check out this quote from President Andrew Jackson. He did not mince words. He called the private central bank of his time a hydra-headed monster eating the flesh of the common man. Wow. He saw it as a predator, not as something that served the people. Okay, so this is all fascinating history, but what does it actually mean for us today? What are the real-world consequences of a system where money is basically created as debt? Well, the book argues the effects are pretty devastating, not just around the world, but right here at home. Brown lays out this absolutely heartbreaking cycle that happens internationally. It starts with developing nations being tempted with these big loans that are just created out of thin air. Then their currency gets devalued, and then international groups like the IMF come in and impose these harsh austerity measures, which basically force these countries to sell off their public assets. We're talking power grids, ports, railways, often to the very same creditors who started the whole mess. And look, this isn't just something that's happening over there. The book draws a direct line from this exact same system to the problems we see right here at home. Think about it. Crumbling infrastructure, those devastating waves of home foreclosures, and a national debt that was already hitting $10 trillion back in 2008. The book argues these are all symptoms of the same disease. And then things get a little insane. The system eventually ballooned into what the book calls a global casino of these complicated things called derivatives. By 2007, the total value of all these bets reached an almost unimaginable number: $681 trillion. To put that in perspective, that is many, many times larger than the entire world's real economy. It's a mountain of phantom wealth. Okay, so after hearing all that, it's pretty easy to feel a little bit hopeless, right? But here's the thing. The book isn't just a downer. It doesn't just diagnose the problem, it actually lays out a path forward, a way to break free from this web. So, what's the big idea behind these solutions? Well, it's actually pretty straightforward at its core. It's all about a fundamental shift, taking the power to create money away from private banks and giving it back to the public. That could look like the government issuing its own money debt-free, like Lincoln did with his greenbacks, or even bringing the private Federal Reserve under the public U.S. Treasury.
And really, it all boils down to this one massive choice. Should our money system be a private business, run for the profit of a few shareholders? Or should it be a public utility, something that's managed for the prosperity and the benefit of all of us?
And that's the final, really powerful thought that Web of Debt leaves you with. It's a huge question, right? It's not just a critique, it's a challenge for all of us to completely reimagine our economy from the ground up and to ask, what could our world look like if we changed the very source code of money itself?